My name is Monica. I'm 37 years old, and I've been married to Caleb, 40, for 7 years. From the very first days of entering his family, I realized I was merely an outsider. His parents, his brother Leon, 40, and his sister-in-law Jenna, 35, practically dominated every part of Caleb's life. They treated me like a stranger, and he let them. His family was constantly engulfed in emergencies, car troubles, hospital bills, due loans. And Caleb always came to the rescue without ever consulting me. The money in our joint account kept disappearing, accompanied by the same old explanations. I just helped Leon a bit. Mom needs the roof fixed. Jenna's car broke down again. I'm an accountant. Numbers are my world. I've always been careful, meticulous about every expense, every bit of savings. That's why, when I decided to keep our savings in a joint account, I trusted Caleb completely. He always said our money was shared, and I never doubted him. Even though I maintained a separate account, it was only a precaution for tough times, not because I lacked trust. But as the money in our joint account began to dwindle, and each inquiry of mine was met with vague explanations, I began to feel something was wrong. And when I received not a single word of thanks for the sacrifices I made, for keeping our family's finances afloat, I knew I had been deceived. That feeling simmered inside me for a long time, until one day, I couldn't take it anymore. I quietly opened a personal account, moved all of my portion of the money into it, and locked it tight, leaving no trace. I never told Caleb because by then, I had realized he was no longer someone I could trust unconditionally. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, needing to protect myself from the very person I had once believed in the most. One weekend, Caleb suggested we take a trip. Just the two of us, no family, no constant phone calls from his mother, Leon, or Jenna. I thought this could be the chance we needed to spend some private time, to work through the rift in our relationship. I hoped something had shifted inside Caleb, that he had come to appreciate what I had sacrificed and would start valuing me more. Deep down, I thought maybe this was the moment we'd reconnect, to rescue something that was growing cold and distant. With that in mind, I planned the whole trip myself. I chose Bali, the place I had always dreamed of visiting. I paid for everything. First-class tickets for both of us, and a beachfront villa where the sea was just outside our door, where the sunsets painted the sky in crimson and the waves whispered to the shore. Everything was planned meticulously. I wanted it all to be perfect. I believed this would be the moment we needed to find what had been lost. The first day in Bali was truly wonderful. We watched the sunset together in silence, Caleb's eyes tender and full of affection, holding my hand tightly, as if trying to anchor me to that very moment. It felt like time had stopped, just the two of us, surrounded by the vast ocean, wrapped in stillness, finding each other again. Our dinner under the soft glow of lanterns was filled with gentle laughter and affectionate glances. I told myself, this is it. This is the moment that will mend us. The first 2 days were truly magical, like a fairy tale I never wanted to wake from. As the days passed, I felt the tension fade, the sadness lift. But I didn't know that a terrible storm was brewing. Something deep within me, an unease I couldn't explain, kept whispering that I shouldn't trust this, not even the sweetness of these moments. Then, on the third evening, when everything seemed perfect, as I sat across from Caleb immersed in warmth, he suddenly looked at me, held my hand, and said calmly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, "I've transferred all your savings to the family's account." That moment was silent, utterly silent. A chill ran through my body, like the air itself had frozen around me. I was stunned, speechless. It wasn't about the money, although it mattered. It was the way he said it. The way he delivered that news, with no shame, no hesitation, as if it were completely normal. Like it was the most logical thing to do. In that moment, everything I had ever believed about him, about us, came crashing down. At that moment, I felt like my heart was being crushed. The feeling wasn't about financial loss, though the money certainly mattered to me. It was the bone-deep chill that came with the realization that the man I had trusted and loved didn't value me. He saw me as nothing more than a financial tool, an outsider to his real life. No permission. No negotiation. Caleb just did it. And in that instant, the look in his eyes was no longer that of a loving husband. It became the look of a manipulator, one who was enjoying my collapse, as if watching everything I believed in fall apart was some kind of reward. I stared into his eyes, unable to comprehend what I had just heard. But before I could even fully process his words, Leon and Jenna walked in. They didn't look surprised. There was no panic, no worry on their faces. They entered with calm, casual expressions, as if everything had already been planned and this was simply the outcome they had been expecting. Leon entered first, followed by Jenna, both of them smiling in a way I couldn't even look at. Their faces seemed to be waiting for my acceptance. Jenna, with her trademark smug smile, looked at me as if everything that was happening was entirely reasonable. "Think of it as your contribution to the extended family," she said lightly, without a trace of concern. Her words, though soft, were laced with condescension. It was a confirmation that I had been used, that I had no voice in this matter. Leon and Jenna stood silently, but each word Jenna spoke cut deep like a knife through my heart. In that moment, my throat tightened. I couldn't speak. A storm of rage and heartbreak surged inside me, but I forced a small smile. Just a faint smile, like I hadn't been hurt at all, when in truth it was me holding back a flood of emotion. I wouldn't let them see me broken. I wouldn't let them witness my collapse under the weight of this betrayal. Then I spoke. My voice was still cold as ice, but steady, free from the haze of anger. "How funny. I also just transferred something." I watched their faces as I said it. A few seconds passed, then all three of their phones started ringing at once. They looked at each other, their expressions beginning to crack, unable to speak. Silence filled the room like fog. Leon raised his hand to silence his phone, but he was too late. Jenna blinked rapidly, as if refusing to believe what was happening, while Caleb just stood there, frozen, his gaze shifting from surprise to fear. That moment changed everything. The lies, the schemes, the calculations, all unraveled. And me, though I felt no joy, knew deep down that I had taken back my power. As they stared at their screens, the air seemed to freeze around us. Silence thickened, almost suffocating. Every second dragged on, and the cold light reflecting off the glass screens carried the weight of truth too brutal to deny. Those screens didn't just show numbers, they showed crushed memories, shattered hopes. Leon's account, empty, as if someone had cleaned it out without leaving a trace. Caleb's parents' investment fund, what I had once thought would bring some security, now reduced to nothing. And our joint savings, once a symbol of building a future together, now just a chilling, hollow zero. I looked at them. One by one, their faces changed. Leon, who had always worn an arrogant smirk, now stood stunned, unable to process the wreckage in front of him. Jenna, the always composed and calculating sister-in-law, now held her head in her hands, eyes wide in shock, muttering, "No, no, this can't be." I felt no sympathy for her. She wasn't a victim. She was just a piece of Leon's plan, a thread in the web he'd spun to deceive me. But the thing that hurt the most was Caleb. He, whom I had once trusted without hesitation, to whom I had given all my faith, stood there in silence, his eyes wide in disbelief. His lips trembled, unable to form words. Like a child who just lost his favorite toy, Caleb sat there, drowning in the shock of what he was now facing. Looking into his eyes, I saw a panic that words couldn't describe. He looked at me as if hoping I would change my mind. But I didn't feel an ounce of pity. Then, in a weak voice, he finally said, "No, you actually took it?" I looked straight into his eyes, unwavering. A strange feeling swept over me, not confusion, not pain anymore, but clarity. A calm, razor-sharp clarity, as if I had finally realized what I needed to do. My voice came out soft but cold, each word falling like the stroke of a blade. "You started this." I'm simply responding in my own way. I didn't look at him with anger or resentment. I just held his gaze, steady, composed. My words weren't a burst of rebellion, but a clear declaration. I was no longer the woman who would let them control my life. What I had done wasn't revenge. It was self-defense. A firm, deliberate step to reclaim control over my own life. No more ambushes. No more hidden agendas. No more knives in the back. From now on, I would be the one steering my fate, unshakable. Inside, my swirling emotions slowly settled. Every step I took from then on was precise, resolute. I had no regrets. Every dollar that was taken, every scheme I exposed, it was a leap forward in rebuilding myself. No one could steal my power again. And I was ready to stand tall, no matter what came next. But it seemed Leon still hadn't grasped the severity of the situation. He looked at me, visibly rattled. Jenna hadn't recovered either. Sweat began to bead on her forehead, as if she were trying to hide a secret that was eating her alive. The entire room was soaked in tension, like a trap waiting to spring. But I wasn't afraid. As I rose from the dinner table without a word, I could feel their eyes trailing me. But I didn't look back. My footsteps were firm, unhurried, leading toward our private villa. Inside me, all the chaos had quieted, replaced by a stillness, like I had entered another world entirely. Before I could open the door, a strong hand grabbed my wrist. It was Caleb, his face contorted in anger. He said nothing. He just tightened his grip, as if trying to force me to stop and face him. His voice came out hoarse, every word strained through clenched teeth. "Where's the money?" In that moment, I didn't feel fear. Instead, a fire of fury ignited inside me. Caleb's eyes no longer showed simple anger. They were the eyes of a man cornered, a wounded animal ready to bite to protect what he thought was his. But I was no longer prey. I stared back at him, and in that moment, I understood he had lost all my respect. Not just my respect for him, but even the respect he once had for himself. Caleb didn't stop. His threats escalated, but this time, they weren't the empty ones I had heard before. He hoped to intimidate me, to make me crumble under fear. But I was different now. There wasn't even a flicker of fear left in me. Only contempt, pure, burning contempt. As if he were playing a game I was long done with. All my bottled up rage and disappointment had reached a breaking point. And this time, I would not bow. He kept threatening, saying he'd call the police. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I was bitter. Because my disgust had grown too deep to contain. That laugh, soft as it was, echoed like thunder. A strike straight to his heart. "Go ahead," I said, my voice cold, without a hint of tremble. "I'm sure the police will be very interested in investigating a husband who secretly took his wife's assets. Not to mention the tax evasion you've been trying so hard to cover up." I knew my words weren't just threats, they were facts. Undeniable truths that he couldn't spin or escape. Caleb fell silent. He froze, his hands stiff, like he'd just been paralyzed by my words. He stared at me, eyes blank and panicked, like he couldn't believe what was happening. But I didn't stop. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a hidden recording I'd saved for months. His own confession. A copy of his exact words when he admitted transferring my money into his family's account. I hit play, and his voice filled the air. Clear, sharp, unmistakable, and utterly indefensible. His voice played out, calm, yet with a brutal bluntness. I could feel the tension in the air thickening, as though the entire room had suddenly fallen silent. No one said a word. Only the recording echoed, filling every inch of space. I looked at Caleb, his eyes wide open, his lips twitching as if trying to form a word, but failing. That recording was like a sharp knife slicing through any excuse he could have made. He had nothing left to say, no defense to stand behind. And then I felt it, an unexpected surge of power rise within me. A feeling I had never experienced so clearly before. It wasn't the satisfaction of revenge. It was the restoration of something that had been taken from me. It was the reclaiming of control over my own life. It was liberation, a rebirth of myself, steady and decisive. Caleb still gripped my wrist, but the strength in him had vanished. He was no longer the man I once trusted. No longer the man I once believed would be my safe harbor. Now he was simply a betrayer. A man who used my love for his own benefit, and now stood helpless before the truth he had created. I looked at him, not with sympathy, not with pity. He had chosen this path, and now he had to face the consequences. You thought you could take everything from me and just walk away? I asked, my voice low but steady, each word a warning. You thought I'd just sit back and keep taking it? Caleb didn't answer. He just stood there, eyes clouded with confusion, unable to meet my gaze. And though I felt no fear, I could see that he did. Not because of the money, but because he knew. He knew everything was slipping out of his hands. I didn't need to say anything else, because I knew, right now, Caleb had lost control. It was over. I didn't feel sorrow for him. I didn't feel anything close to sympathy. All that remained was coldness, a resolute, unwavering cold. He had made his move. And now, I would stand tall and meet the truth head on. No more explanations. No more words. I had taken back control, and that was all I needed. When I turned to Leon, my eyes held no fear, no hurt, just an eerie calm. There was no more torment inside me, only a cold detachment I couldn't put into words. I had seen the final pieces of the puzzle, the pieces about Leon I had refused to see before. What I uncovered wasn't just betrayal. It was confirmation that he was part of something far worse, a larger criminal scheme I could no longer ignore. Leon's actions weren't just greed or selfishness. They were part of a transnational money laundering operation, a financial crime network I hadn't known about until now. Every move he made was calculated. And now I knew. I couldn't let him escape the truth. I tried to contact Tasha, my close friend and a brilliant attorney. But the moment I dialed her number, there was no signal, no connection. Every attempt to seek help failed. Every line was cut off. It was as if they had planned this in advance, anticipated my every move. Now, I was left with silence. A terrifying silence, alone, surrounded by betrayal. Everything around me seemed to shrink, and I wondered, would anyone help me? Could I really stand strong in this battle? As I sat there, I could feel their laughter, their accusations, each one like a blade stabbing into my soul. Everything spun around me, but I fought to keep calm. Caleb and his family had cornered me, forcing me to face the false charges they'd fabricated. They were trying to make me feel guilty, trying to break me. But I knew I wouldn't back down. I was too tired of the manipulation. They would never again treat me as worthless. They would never strip me of everything I'd worked for. With that thought, I didn't hesitate. I picked up my phone and played the second recording, Leon's confession. The sound echoed through the luxurious, chilling room like the click of handcuffs. Everyone froze. Time itself seemed to stop. Leon's hands trembled as he stared at the screen, disbelief all over his face. He couldn't look me in the eye, as if, by refusing to face the truth, it might somehow disappear. Jenna, my sister-in-law, hurried to her feet, but the exit had already been locked. She stood there, hesitating, her face pale, unable to escape the very trap she had helped build. And Caleb, the man I once trusted the most, the husband I thought would stand beside me, now stood frozen. His eyes wide, lips moving without a sound. He was no longer the man I once loved. He looked like a child who had lost his favorite toy, confused, incapable of comprehending what he had done. Then Leon could no longer contain his rage. He shouted, voice filled with fury, as if trying to pour all his anger onto me. You've taken everything from this family. You owe us. Those words hit me like an explosion in my mind. They shattered every ounce of exhaustion and disappointment I had carried inside me. But in that moment, I felt no guilt, no fear. I didn't feel weak anymore. I had been preparing for this moment for a long time. I looked Leon directly in the eyes without blinking and said each word clearly, firmly. I owe no one. It's you who carry a debt you can never repay. Each word was a declaration, unshakable and powerful. I would no longer endure betrayal. I was no longer the woman pushed into the shadows. I had risen and taken back control over my life. No one could manipulate me anymore. No one could make me feel guilty again. I was no longer the weak one. No longer the one in pain. I was the one holding the power now. And Leon would have to face the consequences of his actions. When I turned to leave, I didn't rush. There was no need to look back. No need to check if anyone was following. Every step, every decision I made was deliberate and unwavering. They had played their game, and now it was my turn to end it. No more threats. No more fear holding me back. As I boarded the first-class flight, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. With every minute in the air, I felt freedom settle into my soul, as if I had shed every burden, every entanglement that no longer mattered. After everything I had been through, the peace inside me was the most valuable thing I had. When the plane touched down, I took a deep breath and told myself, that chapter is closed, and the next one belongs to me. As soon as I arrived home, I allowed no hesitation. All channels of contact were cut off immediately. Emails, messages, calls, none of them mattered anymore. With every second, I was shedding everything connected to them. Every sound from the past, every threat from Caleb or his family, no longer held weight. I had done the right thing. I had chosen the right path. Caleb kept trying to reach me, texting, sending handwritten letters, even threatening me. You'll regret this. I'll ruin your life. But those words no longer scared me. I was ready to face everything. And now, everything he said was just the fading echo of a man who had lost control. I didn't respond. Instead, I sent every piece of evidence to Tasha, my companion, my attorney, the friend who had stood by me through this entire journey. Tasha would handle the rest. Caleb was indicted for embezzlement and money laundering. Leon disappeared from the financial system, nowhere left to hide. Jenna evaded questioning, but no one could save them anymore. Meanwhile, I sat in the home registered under my name, a glass of wine in my hand, watching my son sleep peacefully, untouched by any of the chaos. That was all that mattered to me now. A new life, one without manipulation, without betrayal. No court needed to speak for me. No validation from anyone was required, because this time I was justice. Everything I had endured, everything they had done to me, was answered by my own hands. I had moved first. I had brought the truth to light, and I no longer needed karma to catch up, because karma didn't come. I did.